Welcome back to Wally on the Weekend here on KIVA Radio. And January 2020, that means it is not going to be very long before we have to do our tax returns. And here's a guy that's going to let us know what we might expect, what things have changed. Montgomery Delavu CPA. Monty, great to have you on Wally on the Weekend.
It's great to be here as tax season is just beginning.
All right, you look mighty fresh. We'll take a look at you the 16th of April and see what you look like then.
Yeah,
but
I will look different then. Yes.
Well, it is brutal. It's one of those in the olden days. You used to be able to do tax returns. There was more people that had like fiscal year ends in June and March and whatever.
Yeah.
They don't like that anymore. So it's like calendar is 99% of the things out there. Yeah, so it makes you work hard. It makes you work hard.
Yeah, it's very rare to see an individual with something other than a calendar year end. Yeah. So in fact, I don't even have any of those anymore.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they won't let you have new ones. So you had to be grandfathered way in the old days. Yeah. I think those guys are gone. So
yes.
So anyway, so what we had a big tax change, changed everything around. For people that maybe still don't know exactly what happened, give us an overview from a personal tax point of view, what happened in this last year compared to what's been happening before and what people might expect in this tax season.
Well, to give some background, we had our largest tax decrease in history, really in the last well, maybe not history, in the past real 30, 40 years. Reagan's first term really saw the largest decrease in taxes. And now in Trump's first term, we saw a large decrease in taxes. So right at the end of his first year of his first term, he signed in a big tax act, the Trump Tax Act. And it has some fancy name, the Jobs and something.
They always have.
The Trump Tax Act.
There you go.
So, he signed that into effect, and it's very sweeping in the changes. We are experiencing the lowest taxes we've ever had since the income tax was enacted. And so we're experiencing some great tax rates. A lot of people are making moves because of those things, and we can get into talking about. Later in the show, we can talk a little bit about why you might want to convert your traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, because now might be the time to do that. But in terms of tax changes that happened as a result of that Trump Tax Act that was signed in, it was sweeping and a lot of good things. For example, the standard deduction that everybody enjoys. So, for example, if you were married filing joint, your standard deduction that you got to take was $12,000 under the old Tax Act. That doubled to $24,000. And so that means the first $24,000 you earn is exempt from tax.
And that's whether you itemize or not, right? Yeah. So you don't need itemized deductions to get that full $24,000 off the top.
That's right. And itemizing our deductions, there's really four things that make up the itemized deductions, Sure, there's others, but for most of us, there's four things. First is your medical expenses, and that includes medical insurance premiums that you pay.
Yes.
You're going to add that in, all right? The next thing are taxes that you pay, and that's called the SALT tax, state and local taxes, all right? So that's income taxes you pay to New Mexico, all right? So we see those things withheld out of our W-2s, for example, property taxes we pay on our primary residence, and then we get to put little things in addition to this. Licensing and registration fees we pay on our vehicles. That's in there as well. But the Trump Tax Act put a cap on that at $10,000. All right. So with the most we get to take in that category is $10,000.
The miscellaneous one or the overall?
That property tax category.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a new cap that Trump Tax Act put in that category.
And that's why the people are screaming bloody murder in New York State and California because they have expensive real estate, and most of them that make pretty good money have way more property taxes than that.
Yeah, that's right. So they experience that $10,000 ceiling. They hit that. And not only are the individuals screaming about that, but tax agencies from states. Because if we think about that, you're shifting tax revenue away from the state over to the federal government by putting that cap in there.
Right.
So now the Fed gets more tax because it's capped at that level.
Yes.
And so there's a shifting there. All right. And so, we're seeing a little bit of upheaval from the states, and when they recognize that,
Right.
okay, the feds have taken away some of our tax revenues here, okay, by putting that cap in place. The next category, so we're talking about itemizing our deductions, okay? So we covered medical, we covered the SALT, state and local taxes, all right? And the next thing is our home mortgage interest, all right? And so we've always been able to take that. And so the interest we pay on our first home and our second home,
Right.
okay? Now, there was no limit on that before. Now there's a limit of $750,000 in outstanding mortgages. So if you have an outstanding mortgage that is over that $750,000, you can only take interest on the first $750,000, and that's a first and a second home combined.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, other states in California, $1 million mortgage is not that uncommon amongst middle class people. In New Mexico, that's very rare.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that is also capped now.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is, we're seeing a couple categories there that used to not have a cap on them. Now they do. And so we're seeing people with itemized deductions getting limited. There was another category that was very popular down at the bottom of that Schedule A, that itemized deduction schedule, which was called the miscellaneous deductions category.
Right.
That's gone.
Okay.
And so,
no more.
Yeah, no more. And so a lot of people who are W-2 employees, they always use that category because because a popular section in that category was called unreimbursed employee business expenses.
Right.
And a lot of people have those. And so you look at someone, a police officer, for example, who's buying his own weapons,
Right.
his own bulletproof vest, things like that. That type of deduction, that type of area on the Schedule A, the itemized deduction form, is where that person was claiming those deductions before. Now they don't get that. That category is gone.
Yeah.
And so that's frustrating to a lot of people. They experienced that for the first time last year. And that's also what made the income tax preparation process much more difficult for a lot of people, because they were keeping track of their receipts. So one side of the argument says the people that support the Trump side say, well, we've made the tax doing your taxes much easier.
And that is true in general, right?
Yeah. In general.
So like of your clientele that would itemize before, what percentage of those would itemize now? And again, it's not a representative sample, and I don't think we're giving away anything too proprietary, but there's a lot of people move from the itemization to the not. I'm in the not now. That's the first time I've been in the not for
that's right.
50 years.
Yeah,
so.
that's right. And my percentages are representative of what they are nationally.
Yeah.
And so nationally, it was in the low 60%, like 62% of people took the standard deduction. Okay. So we're seeing somewhere in the high 37%, let's say, of people that itemize.
Right.
All right. We're seeing that change by up to 20 points. All right. So we're seeing over 80% of people now are just taking the standard deduction.
Okay.
Yes. And we're seeing something less than 20% are actually itemizing now.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's quite a shift. All right. So it is making the income tax preparation process easier. It has streamlined it because of that doubling of the standard deduction. So in that example I'm talking about, where we have the police officer that said, gosh, I used to be able, I'd buy new weapons or, new gear and things like that I would need for my job. And now I don't get to claim those things. Well, the flip side of that is we get to say, well, if you were single, you were getting a $6,000 standard deduction.
Right.
Well, that doubled to $12,000. And so that $6,000, that additional $6,000 that you're getting, hopefully more than compensates for those unreimbursed miscellaneous itemized deductions you were getting before.
Yes.
And in most cases, I find that it has. Okay.
But as they say, your mileage may vary, and like any change in tax law, some people benefit. And in this case, it sounds like a lot benefited, but there are a few that do not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, talk to me about charitable contributions.
Yeah.
What was how does that work before? How did that work before and now?
No change.
Okay.
And so that is still the same.
All right.
Okay. So charitable contributions are still a deduction if you itemize.
Okay.
So if you're in that, so let's say that population now is 20% that itemize. Okay. So if you're in that population of 20% of people who still itemize, you still get to take your charitable contribution. Okay.
Right.
And so that is still 100%. But now let's talk about some back end effects of that.
Right.
Of these tax law changes. When I saw this, the Trump Tax Act coming out, I thought to myself, gosh, if I'm a charitable organization, I'm shaking in my boots right now because you've just taken my population that I get to tell your contribution is a tax deduction. Well, you've just greatly reduced my
from 37%
population.
down to
Yeah.
like 20%
So-
of the people, not
Yeah.
necessarily of the dollars, but
Yeah.
of the people.
Of the people. So anytime I'm standing up in front of a room now and I represent a charitable organization and I'm saying, your gift to us, your contribution to us is a tax deduction. I'm only talking to 20% of the room now.
Right.
And it used to be upwards of 40%. So you've cut my population in half in terms of those people who could potentially be given to me and getting a tax benefit for it. And so there's some back end effects of this. And that's always the interesting part of tax code that I like to look at and talk about because, everything through history, being a CPA and a tax guy, because I always find the history of tax to be fascinating and how it has evolved, the world. I mean, we can look at, even Mary and Joseph, their trip to Bethlehem
Taxes
was because of a census so that the Roman government could tax people accurately and more efficiently.
Okay.
And it's been that trend throughout history. Okay. But back to your original question, I've given you a long answer talking about itemizing our deductions. Okay. So we talked about the major categories: medical, state and local taxes, property taxes, charitable contributions. Those are our four major categories. All right. The miscellaneous is gone.
Okay.
All right. That went away. So if you do happen to itemize, so let's take our example and let's say that we are married, filing joint. So our standard deduction is $24,000.
Right.
So now we're going to look at our itemized deductions and see if they're going to exceed that. All right. So you look at what you paid in medical premiums and all your medical expenses. You look at state and local, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Go on down the list. If you go above that 24,000, then you want to go ahead and itemize and do the Schedule A.
Right.
Okay. Now let's back into something. Let's talk about medical. Let's say that you don't go over that 24,000. Okay. Don't just forget about your medical, because even if you take the standard deduction on the federal return, you still get to take medical deductions on the New Mexico return.
Yes,
okay?
New Mexico tends to follow the federal, but there's always exceptions, and that's one of the big ones for most individuals.
Yeah, that's right. So I tell my people that a lot of my clients will say, "Well, I'm just taking the standard now, so I don't have to worry about anything."
Right.
So I remind them. I say, "No, still track your medical, even if you're sure you're going to be taking the standard deduction on the federal return, because we still get to take medical as a deduction on the New Mexico return." Now we talk about that at length. But the deduction is pennies. And I'll give you an example, okay? New Mexico, the highest income tax bracket in New Mexico is 4.9%.
Okay.
So let's just say 5% for discussion purposes. So on the New Mexico return, we get to put all of our medical that we've spent. So let's say we spent $10,000 on medical.
That's the number that came to my mind. That's a good round number.
$10,000 on there, okay?
Right.
We get to put that on page 1 of the New Mexico return. Then in the little paragraph section on the side. Then over in the calculation, we get to put 10% of that. So we get $1,000 deduction. Okay. Off of our New Mexico income.
Right.
Okay. Then New Mexico tax rate is 5%.
So am I right? $50?
Yeah. So saving you, spending $10,000 on medical is saving you $50 in New Mexico tax.
Right.
So back into tax theory, this is more of a political move. So the politicians in New Mexico can say, well, on our taxes, we allow people to deduct medical, even if they took the standard on the federal return.
Right.
Well, big deal. If you really want it to be a serious deduction, then let us take the $10,000 directly off of our income.
Right.
Don't limit it to 10%.
Exactly. Okay. Very easy. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about another area, and we can come back, but there's this whole thing about withholding. And in addition to just changing the tax law and changing the rates and changing what's deductible, they mess with the withholding. And, like I remember during the 2008 period, they changed the withholding tables so people actually had more money in their pockets. Well, guess what? A lot of them that got deductions didn't get refunds.
Yeah.
Excuse me. A lot of them that used to get refunds didn't get them. What's the state of withholding tables right now? Because that's always, when your situation changes, it seems like inevitably, unless you have somebody helping you out, and I guess a lot of people don't realize you can actually help people do those calculations and do it more finely than that W-4 form that you fill out when you have a new job.
Yeah.
But it seems like you either paying too much or not enough. It's sure hard to get it right on the money.
Yeah. We want to, when we file our taxes, the optimal situation is we get a small refund.
Right.
Okay. Large refund says that we've loaned our money out interest-free to somebody, the government.
Yeah, the federal government,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. And it's never any fun to have a balance due. So we want to have our withholdings calculated correctly. So we just get a small refund. That's the most efficient use of our money. Okay. So, in calculating that refund, we now, because of the Trump Tax Act,
Right.
we now have a new W-4. So that W-4, which was terrible to begin with,
Right.
is even harder to understand now.
Yeah. It's
It really
no
is.
better.
Yeah, it is no better. So
Now, are people having to fill out new W-4s on?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So employers are coming around and asking people to fill out new W-4s to comply. Now, there is a way for employers to take the existing W-4 and go ahead and move that into the new one.
Right.
So if your employer doesn't do it, and they move your information over, that's still okay. However, it might be inaccurate. So we can run into the situation where you are alluding to, which may cause problems, and I'm going to file my taxes and have a balance due because I didn't have enough withheld.
Right.
We don't want to run into that situation. Okay. So back to what you're talking about. These new tax tables will come out and people will be excited because all of a sudden they're getting more money in their checks. And we've seen this in the past 30 years. This has happened 3 times. Happened in Clinton 1 administration, and happened again in 2008, and then it happened again in 2018 with the Trump Tax Act. Because what happens is political. They push through it. It's for political reasons.
Right.
They push through a tax act, and there's always all kinds of press about it, and then they want to see an immediate effect. Because with a tax act, it usually takes until you do your taxes to really understand and see the result.
Yeah, and so you can't do it for usually the year you're in. It's usually for the coming year, and then you won't see that result for another so it's 15 months is a typical time, if not more, to see the impact.
Yeah, that's right. And so they push a tax act out, and people are, no big deal. I don't see anything different. So then what they try to do is they push new withholding tables out to employers at the same time to say, hey, look, we've changed the tax code and the tax rates are now less. So you can begin withholding less. And so people can start to get larger checks. And so in a lot of cases, that's okay. People get some larger checks because they're having less withheld for federal and state withholding. And so it bumps the economy, and people are happy because they feel good. And, oh, yeah, the news I saw about a tax act being passed, I see that in my check right away, so everybody feels good. Well, in that case, then it comes time to doing your taxes. And based on how your situation is, you may have under withheld now, because back to when those tax tables changed, and you started getting more in your check, and now you go ahead and do your taxes, and that can create problems for a lot of people. And so tax practitioners in early 2018, when the Trump Tax Act came out and these new tax tables came out, we were telling people, hey, wait a second. I know you're enjoying these larger checks, but you need to talk to us and see if that's appropriate for you.
Yeah, and if you're getting a big refund, you might get a smaller one or you'd be okay. But if you're right on that edge, you'd be in a lot of trouble. So we are visiting with Montgomery Delavu, montgomerydelavu.com here on Wally on the Weekend. All right, so Monty, talk to me about the process of getting your taxes done. Let me give you my full disclosure, people on Wally on the Weekend. I'm what's called a recovering CPA. I do have a inactive CPA license, which I like to joke is different than disbarred. Inactive means it was my choice, not the regulatory body. But it's one of those. I know a lot of CPAs because I used to be one. I know a lot about it, but it's one of those things. I used to do my own taxes, but I found that the commercial tax software would sometimes take what I felt like were inappropriately conservative approaches to things, and that's what, a few years back I'm like, that's it. I have colleagues who are CPAs. I'm getting a CPA that I know to be my CPA and do my tax returns again. So that's one issue, and then the other is, what's the state of how you deal with your clients? I know we talked before the show, you have a pretty technologically savvy approach to things that people can get good personal service, but the latest and greatest on our on our smartphones, our computers, and the like. So deal with that first question, if you don't mind, without naming names. Some of those free software that was approved by the IRS is not always what I think people ought to be using.
Oh, absolutely. I think, I like to go back. In that example, I like to tell the story about Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein, arguably the smartest man ever lived.
Right.
Okay. There's a famous quote that he said once, and he said, the hardest thing to understand is the income tax. He used a CPA to do his taxes.
Right.
So if the smartest man who ever lived used a CPA to do his taxes, then everyone should probably follow him and be using an expert to do your taxes. Secondly, when we start talking, so arguably the hardest thing a lot of people do each year is their taxes mentally, to sit there and put everything together and make sure they do it right. And we're combining that with using technology to do it as well when you try to use one of these software packages. What I find with the software packages is on an average, and there's been studies, and so to quote some studies, to complete your tax return, a simple tax return for a single individual with one W-2, they have to answer over 70 questions going through the tax software, and it takes over an hour to do that.
Right.
Okay. If they answer one of those questions, and those questions,
they're tricky.
Yeah, they
are.
Tricky.
Okay, back to my CPA status.
Yeah.
I'm like, I remember something about this. I need to go Google this. I have no idea what they're asking me.
That's right. And so, if you're going to try to combine those things and make some type of an error, we're talking about dollars here.
Right.
And if you end up doing something that is actually wrong, because these softwares never really show you your tax return at the end. They just say you're done and they file it for you. And so you never really get to see your tax return. And so there's risk there. And so we just, I think it's something that does take a professional to be involved with. I have it's funny you mentioned using a CPA. I have several CPAs as clients.
Right.
I do their taxes, and that's just because they don't practice anymore. They're
auditors.
They're auditors, or they're in private industry, but they're a comptroller or a controller for a business. They just don't do taxes.
Right.
And for what you spend to have a CPA do your taxes versus the software, TurboTax and these others, they're more than $100 to do your taxes.
Well, and they'll give you the free version until you need what you really need.
Yeah.
It's like, you have, you have a K1 from a partnership. That's extra. You know what I mean? So there's always the free version, but there's almost most people, not all, but most people will need one of their pricey add-ons.
Yeah, that's right. And I know for a lot of people that are out there, I mean, I have a number of, and not to sound too stereotypical, but I have a number of Sandia engineers.
Right.
Okay. And it's funny because they all so many of them do it the same way. They'll prepare their taxes themselves on TurboTax or one of these others. And then they come in and have me do it. And then they compare the result, and then they want to know, and they're never the same.
Right.
And so then they want to know all the intricacies of why theirs is different from mine. And so I'm always happy to show them their errors and things like that, and why mine's the correct one. But so there are people that they're the do-it-yourselfers, and they're going to they're going to do it themselves no matter what it is in their life. They're going to change their oil, they're going to change their brakes, and they're going to do their taxes themselves. Okay. And that's just how those type of people are. And so that's fine. But, as practitioners, we strongly recommend using a tax expert and really someone certified, a CPA, because we have a vested interest at protecting your information. And that's always the message that I like to get out to people, is that the information you share with whomever is doing your taxes is everything.
Oh, absolutely everything. It's almost like it would be in not to put a negative spin on this, but it's like the identity theft kit in a box.
Right.
You're giving somebody absolutely everything they need
Yeah.
to do very bad things to you. So you need to trust that person.
And you need to make sure that they're protecting their information. So, you may be going over to the tax preparer who does it on their kitchen table at their house. And that person may be as honest as can be.
Right.
Okay. But you're giving your driver's license, your bank account information, social security number, date of birth, address, everything to that person. That information is sitting on their kitchen table or their wherever in their house. And who knows what their kids are up to or other people that come into the house, things like that. And so you just want to make sure you're using a professional who is responsible with your information and is going to protect that information. Okay. And so that's a message we always like to get out. Use a CPA. We are vested at protecting your information. And we have, requirements on our license and things like that at protecting that. And so that's important to us. And so we always like to get that message out. Be careful who you're using. I call it the my cousin Vinny approach.
Yes.
And so if you hear somebody say, "Hey, my cousin Vinny does taxes," and you go over and they're doing it, in their living room on their coffee table, and they want $50, for doing your taxes. That's just should show up with some red flags. The other thing is that the other message we'd like to get out is if a tax preparer's fee is ever based on the refund they're getting you, then that's a big red flag. So if you meet with a tax preparer and they say, well, if I get you back $2,000, then my fee is 20% of that. Right. That's a big red flag. Okay?
Yeah, because what if your situation, you actually, under any set of aggressiveness, owe money? Yeah. That means they're cheating to get you that refund.
Yeah, that's right. And so tax preparers, CPAs, we're absolutely not allowed to charge based on a refund. We have to charge a fixed fee rate or an hourly rate or something like that, or a negotiated rate. And so those are a couple messages we like to get out to the public about, the type of tax preparer that you're deciding to use.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if somebody were, and let's talk a little bit about your practice now. I know there's different styles of getting your taxes done, and I know you kind of use a few of them, but blend them in. Just talk about some of the approaches for how you've been working with your clients, because I've heard your story a couple times. That's one of the reasons I like having you on, is that I think your approach makes a lot of sense for people and gives them some options.
Yeah. I love the use of technology. And so, and plus customer demand drives that use of technology. So in my practice, I really have 4 different types of tax clients. And I love all 4 kinds, and I put that on my website. The first kind is the traditional tax client. That's the tax client who schedules an appointment and comes in once all their documents are received. They bring their documents in, and they're in a folder or a shoebox.
Yeah, a folder, good. Shoebox. We used to, they call them shoebox clients because stuff was just thrown in the shoebox, right?
And they come in and they meet with you, and they hand you their documents one by one, and you talk about them, and then they schedule a pickup appointment when their tax return is ready. And that's usually a week later or something like that. So then they come back in when their tax return is ready, and you have their return ready, and you return all their documents to them. They sign their return, and they're done. So that's a traditional tax client, and that tax client's been going on for the last 70, 80 years.
Well, and that used to be the only way to do it.
That was the only way to do it. Yeah, that was the only way to do it. But now with the internet and technology, there are much more efficient ways to do it. And so that's my first category of tax client. I'm going to jump to my 4th category of tax client. And this is a new tax client that I'm calling the tax freeloader. Okay.
Yes.
The tax freeloader uploads their documents to me. Okay. Yes. I'm going to do that tax return free of charge. Once I get those documents, I'll upload it to me. Okay. And then we can even file that tax return. Once the client has reviewed it and signed it, we can even complete the filing of that tax return at no charge. The IRS then will take that refund, and they'll send me my fee out of the refund and send the rest of the refund to the client.
Okay.
So that's my tax freeloader.
Yeah, so they don't have to have any money out of pocket.
No,
they will take it.
They don't pay for anything.
Now, unless they don't get a refund, and you'll know that pretty darn quick.
Yeah, so once I calculate that, they upload all their tax docs to me. So all my clients can go online, and they can start up a free upload account. So they put in some information on my website that creates an upload account for them. That's their own secure portal in my cloud. Okay.
And those documents are using, like, you can use your cell phone to take pictures and upload. Is that the main way to do it now?
Oh yeah. All this is done right on their phone.
Yes.
So from their phone, they can go to my website using the browser on their phone. They can set up their account. They can upload their documents, and then on their phone, they're going to receive a summary version of their tax return that tells them what the refund is.
Yeah.
Then at that point, they have the option of either pay me now or pay by refund.
Yeah.
Okay. Pay by refund costs a little bit more because there's a third-party intermediary that's doing it, so they get a piece of the action.
Like a credit card processing fee, basically,
that's right.
conceptually.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Or if their return shows they have a balance due, then obviously they're going to pay me at that time before I file it, e-file it for them. And so that's really where the customer market is going now, because we do everything on our phones. We apply for mortgages on our phones. We do our banking on our phones. We deliver checks. Younger generation find their, are using, all the dating services, things like that. So we just do everything on our phones now. So we expect to be able to interact with a CPA to have our taxes done on our phones as well. Okay.
Yeah, and and I liken that almost to we're seeing a lot more phone-based medicine. My health insurance plan, I can meet with a nurse practitioner on the phone.
Yes.
So it's not, no one's at this point, there's a lot of artificial intelligence out there in the world, but we're certainly not there in medicine or in finance. And so you can have access to a person, but you can do it very efficiently using your phone.
Sure can.
Yeah.
And then we combine some personal interaction with that. So if necessary, we can also FaceTime right on the phone, answer questions about things. So if they have questions about their tax return, absolutely, I will FaceTime with them right away, right on their phone. We can look at the tax return together on their phone. And so that way we still have that human interaction that's built into it. So it's not just upload your docs and you get a tax return back and that's it. No questions asked. If there needs to be some clarification on either side, either from my client or from me, then we will jump into a FaceTime and we'll look at documents together, things like that, and answer questions.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Now, and then the other two types are in between those. So it's some in person, some using technology. Am I right about
in between,
that?
Yeah, it's basically a hybrid of the two, where they'll upload all their documents via their smartphone. I'll prepare the return, and then they want to come in and meet with me in person when the return is ready.
All right.
So then they come in, and then we have an in-person meeting, and they sign in my office and things. And so that's kind of a hybrid of the two. And actually, right now, that's the most popular of the categories. That hybrid category. Yeah, I'm going to upload all my stuff to you as it's coming in, but then once it's all ready, I want to come in and see you.
All right, good.
Yeah.
All right, good. All right, in the brief time we have, Monty, give us some observations for how the people that have a good luck with it financially, just general, and not only on taxes. You have a lot of clients that do a lot of things. What are some of the best practices that really help people get going in a good direction financially? Yeah. And if there's any that are worse practices that tend to always trip a certain category of people up?
Yeah, attention to detail. I will see, I'm blessed with just hundreds of clients, and I'll see people that make the same amount of money. So one family that makes $100,000 a year, okay, but they seem to live so well, and they have, they just do well, drive car, nice cars, kids have well. Then I also have another family that makes the same amount of money, $100,000, but yet they're just broke and financial trouble, and credit problems, things like that.
Yes.
And really, the difference between the two is attention to details. They constantly review the first example where they're always doing well on the 100,000.
Right.
Attention to detail. They're reviewing where their money goes, and they're just on top of things.
Yep. The
other side, the $100,000 family that is always in financial trouble, they're not paying attention to detail. They're not looking where their money goes, and not paying attention. And so it's not about how much money you make. It's how much attention you pay to that money. And that's the difference that I see. Some people are just very good at managing their money and paying very close attention to it. And just some people are not. Yeah. And so it just comes from what I see. It just comes down to that.
Yeah. And so if I'm in that bad category, I always think of the Highlights magazine, Goofus and Gallant. Yeah. If I'm in the Goofus category and I want to be the Gallant, do you have some tools or techniques you can work with people to help them go from that bad to that better category?
Use a money management software. There's things like Mint and Quicken, things like that.
Yeah.
Just start using one of those software packages and just be diligent about it. Spend 5-10 minutes on it every day. It's going to download all your transactions that have cleared through your bank. go through and look at those transactions. It's going to help you with a budgeting plan.
Yeah.
And so you can set forth a budget, and that way you can really understand and see where your money's going.
Right.
And you'll notice that, you might notice those $5 Starbucks coffees every day do not make sense.
Yeah.
And things like that. Yeah. So just attention to detail is key.
All right. Very good. So how can people get a hold of you if they would like to use your services? The fresh Montgomery Delavu here at the beginning of tax season.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And so the best way to reach me is through my website. And it's not I would like to come up with a condensed website name, which I will be doing.
Yes.
And the American Institute of CPAs is coming out with a .cpa instead of .com.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that. That's supposed to roll out any day, actually. And so I've already reserved Montgomery.cpa.
Okay,
so I'm
great.
going to have that. That's going to be real easy.
Yeah.
But for now, it's MontgomeryDelivu.com. So it's MontGomery and then DILLAVOU. MontgomeryDelivu.com. You can go there. You can schedule appointments on my website. And so that's how you can get started. You can open up your portal account on my website, and that's how you can get started uploading documents. And so everything is right there. Of course, my phone number, my office location, things like that, all the regular stuff you see on a website are on there as well.
All right. Very good. We've been visiting with Montgomery Delavu, MontgomeryDelivu.com here on Wally on the Weekend. We're so happy you're listening to us, and we hope you stay tuned.